1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Naririnig mo ba siya?
Do you listen me?
Sound check.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay siya.
You hear me? Do you hear me? Oui. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? No? Yes? It's good? Is it good?
Oo, ayan. Todo na, nakaangat na.
Okay? It's okay? I speak?
Ayan, okay.
It's good? I am hearing. Yes, the same, no?
Ayaw nila nung ano, aircon.
You've had 3 hours to set this up.
Le matériel n'est pas compatible. Il faut un pour l'auditorium. C'est bien parce qu'ils ont, un parfum de la chose et maintenant on peut parler tranquillement.
Oui, la moitié. L'autre moitié, non, mais ça fait rien. On va parler comme ça.
Comment la moitié?
Il y a des gens ici qui sont attendus ici.
Oui, on te met ça. Tant pis
C'est
pour eux.
leur problème.
C'est leur problème. Bon, allez. Alors tu as vu le pétrole et le gaz?
C'était formidable. Quand je vais retourner de nouveau,
Ouais.
c'était plus beau que ça. Troisième fois.
Can you equip? Thank you.
No. I'm back here.
Hello? Yeah, I think it's good. Hello? Is that working? I think it's good. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
We can begin, I think.
You can hear me? Yeah. Jean, ça va? Okay. Okay. We're ready to go. Sorry about the delay. I don't know how many of you were on the tour and how many of you weren't. Hopefully all of you have seen the museum. What we're going to do is just pick up on some of the themes that we talked about as we were walking through and explore them a little more. We have a limited amount of time.
Too loud, no?
Is this too loud? Too what? Okay.
Perfect.
I'll whisper and talk softly. So what we'll do is we're just going to talk about a couple of themes because we have a limited amount of time, and then I'm going to ask you for your thoughts, questions, so that we can respond more directly to any questions you have about the museum. But I want to come back to what we first talked about. I know that we start at the beginning, the desert rose, and this idea of the narrative in the building, because a lot of attention's been given to this idea of the desert rose as a symbol of Qatar, as a way of connecting back to the history of the desert and the roots of the country. But I think there are two things worth exploring a little bit more. One is this idea of modernity and the formal language, which is as much about the present as it is about the past. I think it's about bridging the two, right? Which maybe hasn't been discussed enough. And then this idea of how it's not a formal language, it's just about giving a visual impression, but it's about how you shape space and the galleries and how you tell a story.
Yeah. Architecture, I think, is an art, and the nature of the art is not to answer to the question, but to give a proposal. What is a question? A permanent question.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a permanent question, and it's not a canard in the Manchurian way, because it's not a shape outside, very precise about the object. It's a typology, and this typology is used after to create mysteries, questions, and to integrate an evolutive program, because we have a collection. And this collection is a very specific collection because we are in a nomad country. We don't have the same material on the ethnographic point of view than other countries in the world, which are not nomad. And here we enrich the collection with artists to talk about the question where we don't have enough document to talk about the history of the country. So you understand that a system is a random system like this. We can create different things at different scales. We can organize the novel of the Qatar in different chapters, and we can adapt that in the time.
Can you talk a little bit more about the randomness and how you, because you spoke when we were walking through the galleries about even though the geometry seems random, at the same time it had to be shaped with a certain kind of rhythm.
Yeah, when you have a random system, you can of course adapt this system. It's not something we find exactly like this. So we can adapt, and it doesn't change the correspondences, the feeling of that. But we could adapt also after what is inside, the content on the screens, on the building itself, because the building itself becomes the message. So you can adapt that in the time, and it's flexible after.
I mean, there were other elements too that were worked into the idea of the sand. Maybe you should explain a bit also the history of the design, because if we go all the way back to the beginning, there was an earlier design. 2005, I think, was when you were first invited here. And it was there was almost nothing, right?
Yeah, but we have to explain why we are on this site. We are on this site because it's the site of the royal family with a little castle. You saw a part of this castle at the end of our trip. And the history of Qatar is always the meetings of the desert and the sea. Peninsula, it's a desert with the sea all around. So the site is a very good place because it's on the Corniche. It's very long along the sea, and you have the royal family, and you have a great land of desert. So that was the first answer to this question. That was to say we will show the history with the castle, the desert with the ground, and the sea itself, and it's a program that was an aquarium also in this time, and I put the aquarium in the sea, in the laguna, because I recreate the natural coast before the construction of the Corniche. But in the discussion they said, for a national museum it's not enough present. Perhaps for an art museum it could be correct, but for a national museum, we have to talk with symbol of the country. We need a monumental approach and a strong presence in the city. So for this reason, we redesigned that in the way of this symbol of the architecture created by the desert itself with millenniums, is the sand rose, this crystallization, and extrapolation and out of scale of this extrapolation, and that is the beginning of another story.
One of the things, we've talked before about the relationship of the building to the sand, to the lightness of Bedouin culture, and also to the sea. But one of the things that really impressed me, which I only noticed today after visiting the building several times, is that it also has a relationship to urbanity in the city. And in fact, you're meant to approach the building first through the city, right? So I find in many ways the building is about bridging the distance between the origins of the country and the process of modernization that has happened so unbelievably fast here, because you have waves of modernization starting really after the discovery of oil in the 70s. And then it's accelerated, and now we're in the midst of a...
But I think what is important is...
technological kind of boom.
The museum is a symbol of, as for symbols, the sand rose. But this symbol is a symbol of solidity, of long history, but in the same time...
Is everyone hearing clearly? No? Are you hearing anything? I'm too loud and Jean's too soft.
Yeah, and me, I am hearing, I don't know what behind a huge... oh, perhaps.
Now you lost me? Okay.
Hoy, wag na tayo magganto ng maita lang. Kuya, ito, lagyan yung audio to.
It's a huge noise behind. It's noisy. Doors are closed. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So what I explained, the sand rose is not the unique symbol
I think mine works.
of the museum. The symbol change of meaning when the symbol is out of scale.
because Sun Rose is a symbol of eternity, like the desert, of solidity. But when you create that at this scale, it became a symbol also of the modernity, of the technology, how to create a space like this so complex for a museum at this scale. And when you look at the museum, you have also an idea of the modernity, of the present, and of the future. So for me, that was a perfect symbolism with all these parameters, not only the shape of a sand rose, like a precise shape. It's not a precise shape, it's a typology with plan and disc with intersection, but it's not a canard in the Venturian way, with a perfect shape of sand rose and something like only a Las Vegas project.
Sorry to keep checking. Is this idea of narrative in the museum, which we talked about briefly when we were walking through it. I know Rem, when we went through it the first time together, mentioned that it was a cinematic narrative, which is really your initial idea. And I wonder if you could explain that, because obviously in telling the story, of a national museum, you have changing exhibitions. So you
of the building. They wanted a symbol and wanted to create a destination also linked to this museum. And also perhaps to attract all the people coming in this incredible hub, because every week in this city you have a lot of events. So a lot of people come to Qatar and to Doha, and they could have the desire to understand the nature and the history of the country, and then but perhaps more the desire is also to look at creativity and architecture of today and so on. So that was a part of the program also, to create this attractivity.
Yeah, but also it's this idea, when I first walked through the museum, the precedents I thought of were, funnily enough, the Guggenheim in New York, Frank Lloyd Wright's Spiral. Maybe Zaha Hadid's Maxi. Because the criticism, obviously, of the Guggenheim has always to mount an exhibition of art. A lot in a much more controlled way, but with also ways back out and into it. So to me, it's a different typology for a museum, or a new...
You are an excellent historian, critic, and I agree with what you said.
Yeah. But do you see what I mean, in terms of how you tell the narrative? You had mentioned also in the gallery this idea that it was a narrative without end, right?
What?
It's an infinite narrative, that it does not end.
Without end, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Can you explain how you did that through the architecture?
Yes. I think museums, and mainly this kind of museum perhaps, they have to be adapted also to the history. And they have to be enriched by other collections. If we open the door to create a dialogue between the epoch by the intervention of artists of today, we can go on. We can enrich this museum every year, and we can add also other questions, and we can put this question in the museum, in the life and in the museum. So it's done for that.
Yeah. And one more question about the galleries themselves, because I feel like people didn't focus enough on it in earlier discussions, is this: when did this idea of film as such an integral part of the narrative emerge? I know part of the issue was in the history, because we're talking about a Bedouin culture, there were maybe fewer objects that you could use to tell the story.
I think we have to go in the depths of every characteristic of the history of Qatar. What I explained since the beginning is we have a fantastic contrast on the museographic point of view. Perhaps we can accentuate it. We could. We have, if it's a caricatural approach, we can say we have the Museum of the Desert, and after a kind of strong events, I call that a little Big Bang. And you have another life, another city, another territory. And this contrast is, for the museography could be fantastic if we go on in the depths of the desert and in the exploration of the Qatar of today with all the activities of this hub on different scientific point of view, cultural point of view, life and meeting place. All of that is this reason what I explained. I think that.
Let me turn to another question, a different question. Many people talk about the difficulties of working as, say, a European industrialization has affected that. I was thinking also about, for example, when Le Corbusier was working in Chandigarh in the 1950s. It was also a politically identity for a modern India. And now in a kind of a age, and with the kind of accelerated pace of architecture and movement, there's been a lot of criticism on the part of many people about how one as an architect begins to understand a culture, or can you understand another culture so quickly when you come in and out on a few visits, over the course of a year. How do you counteract that? How do you engage the culture? How do you find your way in? And what do you feel about that in general? Because you're working in China on Namok, kind of building a major museum in Beijing that's also has a lot to do with Chinese identity.
Yeah, but with the Airways company, it's a very strong hub now. People are coming here to go in other places. So if they want to look at something here, it's very easy. So we integrate the new nature of the city to have a permanent place with a lot of events, a lot of cultural events. And the National Museum has to be in this way. And not always the same collections. For this reason, it's so important today to show that we have temporary exhibitions place also, and not only the collection, but the collection themselves. They will have an evolution, and the last galleries will talk about the future and will explain different things.
Well, the last gallery also brings us back. And maybe in a minute I'll ask one more question, I'll let you ask questions. But brings us back full circle to this idea again of modernity, because modernity obviously has a complicated history in the region, politically, and it also has a complicated history in terms of architecture. Because when you frame it in a more political context, for example, I think one of the ways to understand an important way to understand the projects that have gone on in Qatar and in the Gulf in general in the last, I guess, 15 years in this boom of construction can be understood as a kind of an effort to define oneself as a culture and pushing back against a certain history of modernity that came from the West. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that these projects started after September 11th. And the invasion of Iraq, and Western kind of antagonism towards the Arab world. And so I think you can see the projects also as a way of grappling with the history of modernity from a Qatari perspective, right? Yeah. Can you talk about that? Because you talk about the history of Qatar and then also of modernization and urbanization, and I think that it is part of a bigger project.
Yeah, but this kind of strong development is a good opportunity to create architecture, and to create strong programs, and to become a very strong witness of the evolution of the world today, perhaps more is more easy than all the European cities, for example. You have good reasons to build and to complete that. And the meaning of the exhibition of today, Laboratory of Architecture is Doha, is true, because a lot of architects came here and it's not finished. And if they want, they have to play this card, of course, I think. Not only for cultural reason, for economical reason, for prestigious reason. And it's easier for them to play this card than for other countries where everything is already built, or which have not the same structure of the tourism by the companies and the hub.
Well, I think one of the, just to comment on that, one of the things that I find really interesting about the work you're able to do here is that in a lot of ways, clients now are developers working on spec, and so there's a sense that, for me, in a lot of countries, that the connection architecture has with a kind of a larger purpose or a larger sense of identity has been lost. And one of the interesting things about what's happening here, I think, is that it really has been reconnected to this idea that you can use architecture to shape a collective identity, to shape the idea of what a civilization is. And I think that...
I think it's that, and I think also if they could have also another opportunity is to consider that the structure itself of the city will be a new kind of structure and urban planning. But we go in the traditional way with different spots and the contrast, strong contrast between the collage and contrast between the buildings. But if it's possible also to have a strategy, to have this transition, to have a vision of Qatar and of Doha, and to play since the beginning with a real target to create the city of the 22nd century.
Very good. I think that's a nice place to end for now. So I'm going to open it up. I hope there's microphones. I don't have one here if we have to pass one around. And give you a chance to ask some questions. Is there someone who can deal with this? You can just speak. Here. Maybe it's better with a microphone so everyone else can hear. Of what? Sorry?
To the
I have found
how do you find the desert rose? How do you know about its existence? Yeah.
An architect has always to find something.
Well, that's sure.
When he has a program, he says, what I can find here? No, but really, they wanted really a symbol. So a symbol of the desert, a symbol of the modernity, a symbol of the energy. You research and you do different hypotheses, of course. I did not want to do a traditional building linked to the past. I wanted something talking about this strong contrast I explained about the epoch of the nomadism and the desert and the eternity of the desert like this, and the new activity, unpredictable also for the future, but the energy linked also to the energies of the gas and the oil. So the museum tries already to talk about that, but perhaps it's just the beginning. So this architecture, this place, and this structure has to be done symbolically and in the reality to answer to that. An architect had to answer to this kind of contradictions.
May I have a question?
Yes?
Yes. I'm coming from Turkey on behalf of an architectural magazine. I admired the building. Thank you so much. Can you little bit give us structural information about it? Because I shared in social media. Some of the colleagues from Turkey asked about it.
You're asking about this building or?
This building, structural system, I mean.
Oh, the structural system.
The structural system is a mystery. How do you know the structure of a sunrose inside? Inside the stone? No.
No.
But me, I don't know what is behind my stone.
Really?
No, because that was very difficult to build that at this scale. Very, very difficult. So I had to do that without the feeling of the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So without the feeling.
I often say that if you do a fantastic jump, if you are a good dancer, it's wonderful. But if at the arrival you have a sound on the floor, pom, 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 it's dead. So how many pipes you have behind and so on, it's not interesting. For me, in this case, with the symbolism and with the nature of this building, what is important is to give this symbol and to give also another way of the utilization of this museum. Another way of museography also, of communication with images, of communication with models, of communication with infography, of communication with different things. And you keep in the same times what we have already in the museums, the ethnography and the objects existing here. But the evolution of the technology and the evolution of the program are possible with this kind of tool. It's a tool here also. And this tool don't want to show that it's a tool. He want to show what the tool done.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I think I will ask the question to your team by email because the mystery is a big question.
Can we, another question? Let's, over here maybe, just to move it around. Here. There's someone here in back, just to move around a bit. Okay.
Bonjour, Monsieur Nouvel. Je suis Vichy Matos, une vieille grande amie du Qatar. Je suis vraiment impressionné par comment votre œuvre exprime le Qatar et le désert, mais même ces gens polis qui bougent bien, qui savent face à n'importe quelle situation. Enfin, moi, je me suis identifiée très bien avec votre œuvre. Je voulais vous demander.
Closer, like this. To touch le bâton.
La question?
Si vous êtes aussi surpris par le résultat de votre œuvre grandiose comme nous sommes.
Je peux pas être. I cannot be surprised like you because I tried to imagine a little bit that. What I explained, an architect has to do for himself the movie of what he'll imagine. So all the beginning of all my mornings are white mornings, like you have a white night, and I try to imagine. So what is a surprise very often for an architect, because even if you try to imagine everything, it's always the feeling of the reality. It's arrived, and the feeling of the scale, for example. That is the most important question for an architect. But for the rest, I am not surprised because I knew the novel before you, because I wrote it.
Merci.
Okay. I think we have one last question we have time for, and then we have to stop.
I have one question, please. Art is about the search for beauty and truth. And my question to you would be if you had the freedom to have a title of your story of this museum with a couple of one words, what would that be? The main story of the museum.
One word, you said? If you had to give in one word the story of this museum.
With one word?
I mean, I think you're asking, but I think
A series of one word.
a series of one words.
I think it's always the same question with the art question. You have never to explain. I think it's what I explained also at the beginning. I don't want to give answers. It's done. It belongs to you also. It not belongs to me. And what is your feeling about that, and what is the meaning of that? My opinion is not so important. And the artwork is here. You have to do with that.
I mean, I would only add that, I mean, the architecture is a language. It's the language that he speaks, and that the building is about expressing a way of life, not a kind of cliches about some kind of typology, but through the architecture to express the way of life of Qatari people. I'm going to have to cut.
It's deep and contradictory.
See, I have to end it there. We're out of time. Thank you for coming.